I think most gamers will agree that there hasn't been quite such a phenomenon as Pokémon. In the 90s, kids had everything from the Game Boy games, trading cards, and VHS tapes of the legendary creation from Japan. Fast forward to 2018, and every generation enjoys the monumental amount of creations from Satoshi Tajiri's simple love of catching bugs. Pokémon Go is a simple phone game that grips everyone from kids to grandparents. It's only natural that Nintendo's next creation was a combination of this new world with the old. This idea can seem a bit worrying, and we'll figure out for ourselves in a familiar location in Pokémon Let's Go. Starting up the game brings you to a few options you have in terms of how you can play. You either use one Joy-Con, the Pokeball Plus, or handheld. It's a little sad to think that players have been faced with two recent Nintendo titles that don't allow the use of their expensive Pro Controller. I'll get more into controls later, but it would have been totally possible to add it in. For returning veterans, as soon as you start the intro with Professor Oak, the nostalgia will hit you. When I played through the game, I tried very hard to not let nostalgia-tinted lenses affect my review, but man, it hits hard at times. You go through the simple process of naming your character and refraining yourself from naming your rival something vulgar. Afterwards, you get thrust into your bedroom on the day in which you start your Pokemon journey. While you and your strangely nice rival try to find Oak, you stumble upon him researching Pidgeys in the tall grass. This ultimately leads to the capturing of your new companion, Pikachu or Eevee, depending on which game you bought. It's here that you're introduced to the major mechanics of the game. Catching Pokemon no longer requires weakening by other Pokemon you have caught. You simply need to throw a Pokeball with the motion of the Joy-Con in a similar way that you do in Pokemon Go. The color of the ring will indicate how difficult it is to catch, and landing a Pokeball in the middle of the ring as it gets smaller will provide catching bonuses. At times, there's also a noticeable amount of lag between your throws and the Pokeball being thrown in the game. I'll get more into this in just a moment. After heading back to the lab and getting your major assignment of completing the Pokédex by catching all known species of Pokemon, you'll be faced with one of the best features of this game. There's no more running around in tall grass waiting for random encounters. You can physically see each one running around in the environment. I initially thought this would be kinda gimmicky, but because Pokemon cycle out every now and then, I'm completely spoiled with how alive this makes the world feel. But in my opinion, this is where I started noticing some things I didn't like. Never having to weaken a Pokemon before you catch just takes a lot of fun out of the game. The system was replaced with a main mechanic of a phone game. I will say this, I actually love the idea of catching Pokemon this way. There's a slight amount of skill involved, and it just immerses the player more. But this should have been added to the previous system, not replace it. It's also really great that you can take a closer look at their models and animations after catching them. I just think they missed a great opportunity. Another mechanic that disappointed me was how catching Pokemon provides experience for your entire party. It just makes a ton more sense that battling would increase experience rather than doing nothing. And because you'll be catching so many Pokemon to transfer them later for candies and leveling up your party, you'll probably be annoyed with all the menus you have to click through to get back into the world. As you'll find out a little into the game, battling is still very much available with trainers, and this also gives experience to the entire party. Now, I'm sure there are many of you out there that will enjoy how easy this makes keeping your party relatively the same level, but part of the satisfaction of finally making a powerful team of 6 is all the hard work you put into getting them to that point. In Pokemon Let's Go, you can simply catch a Charmander and not care to use it until it's a Charizard. Isn't that just a bit too bland? Boring? There's no connection to your Pokemon at that point. To add even more to this, the game tries so hard to make everything as easy as possible for the player. When entering a gym, you'll usually have to complete some requirement that ensures the fight with the gym leader is easy. Whether it's a level requirement or even owning a Pokemon that directly counters theirs. I personally loved journeying to a gym with the desire of figuring out their team and coming back after defeat to stomp them with a new strategy. Instead, gyms seem to be regarded as something you should beat on the first try and move on without a second thought. Plus, sometimes your Pokemon will just resist fainting because of love for your character and continues to make things too easy. Again, the entire experience just feels hollow. But let's move on to some areas I think they did well in. Visually, I think everything looks fantastic. Some might complain that they want realism brought into this world, but honestly, do we want creatures that look like what we saw in the Detective Pikachu trailer? That's a hard no from me. But really, they've evolved the visuals to be similar to even what I expected from the older games. They created a 3D world that looks the way it should. You really become immersed into the environment when your designated follower will find something in a nearby bush, or Pikachu will want to experience something like a fountain. My only complaint is I think some of the faces of certain characters just seem a little strange. The models of Pokemon themselves are just amazing, whether they're running around in the wild, following close behind you, or battling. Speaking of which, certain fighting moves look very well done, but others like Double Kick just look like they had no work done to them. He really just hops in the air with no animation, and that does damage? After sinking so many hours into this title already, my favorite thing to do is just experience this familiar world that looks absolutely gorgeous. Even on a 4K TV, I didn't notice much aliasing or fuzziness. Although I will note, every now and then, a lot of times in the menu, I notice some frame drops. It's a little confusing as to why that is, because as you'll hear later, the battery life when playing this game is just amazing, so it can't be too demanding. Another ability they brought to this world of Kanto is being able to dress up not only your character, but your Pikachu or Eevee. Now, I'm going to start by saying that I'm not really sold on this idea. Call me old-fashioned, but I like the way Pokemon look in their natural form. But I admit, I did slap on a Team Rocket outfit as soon as it became available for my Pikachu. I just really like the idea of having to go around and collect all the pieces just for the sake of collecting. Something else that has been brought to the Switch is being able to play with your Pikachu or Eevee. Most of the time will just be spent petting them or feeding them berries, but I have yet to see the real benefit of doing this. I really don't care too much for this feature, but I can't complain about having it. What about audio? Veterans will notice that most sounds are enhanced versions from their childhood. While it's hard to really say that the sounds that imaginary creatures make sound bad, there's never really been leaps and bounds in the different cries among Pokemon. Still, hearing them in the wild and knowing which one they are before you even see them is a very fun experience. Battles themselves are pretty well done, and you feel a lot of the impact of certain moves in the way that they sound. Again, not all that fancy, but it does the job. For me, I just loved hearing all the music in different environments and towns. Whether it's the Pokemon Center or the cursed melody of Lavender Town that will one day consume us all, just perfection. As to expect from a Pokemon game, it's also a very focus on communicating with other players and devices. Because it's essentially made for Pokemon Go, you can connect to your mobile account extremely easy. Just access your settings in Pogo and tap on Nintendo Switch near the bottom while communicating from your Switch. You won't be able to take advantage of this until you get to Fuchsia City, but it's still an interesting interaction they've made. The co-op feature is actually pretty nice. All you have to do is have another Joy-Con present, turn it on, and shake it, and all of a sudden the other player just drops in the world. They can't interact with characters or Pokemon themselves, but anytime you're going to be catching a Pokemon or battling, they will be present in the fight with you. Together you can catch Pokemon, make it a little bit easier when you both land and throw together, and in battles they will actually have another Pokemon from your party out to fight, even a single opponent. Now, the main thing about this is that it just blatantly makes everything easier. 2 versus 1 is just not fair. But for those who just want some help and don't really care if they're taking advantage of the system, will actually really enjoy battling together. Just having the option by itself is really interesting for a Pokemon game, and I've never really experienced what it could possibly be like, but this makes me hopeful to the future. Other than that, you can trade or battle with friends nearby on another Switch, or through the internet. But honestly, actually connecting with your friend is kinda laughable. Similar to raids in Pokemon Go, you enter in a code with pictures of Pokemon and connect with others of the same code. So basically, you have to hope that you and your friend are the only ones with that code at that specific time. Our first try landed me with someone from China. I just don't understand why this couldn't be easier. At least the trading and battle was an awesome experience though. Because everything is turn-based, you really shouldn't notice any issues with latency while playing. They also scale your Pokemon up to the same level, which is always welcome to make it a fair fight. And since we are playing on the Switch, how's the handheld? I grew up playing Pokemon on handheld devices, so I was more excited for the docked experience. But they went and made it so great for taking on the go. It's just too easy to be able to save your game and pick up where you left off in a moment's notice. The catching mechanic has also been replaced with a simple button press, but you also have to use the gyro controls to line up your Pokeball. As an aside, this is what I was referencing to when I said the Pro Controller should be implemented. At the very least, they could just allow motion controls instead of swinging it. Getting back on topic, everything is very easy to read and there is no noticeable loss of quality with the 720p screen. The art style makes it very easy to do this. But the big benefit is the battery life. Playing from 100%, I honestly lost track of time. I played for somewhere around 5 to 6 hours before seeing the low battery icon. My Game Boy might have lasted longer, but it didn't have this huge screen of gorgeous visuals. Why must they make me enjoy the handheld even more? Overall, this game has been a huge nostalgic trip for me. Familiar faces and Pokemon with the incredibly upgraded world and visuals are what many of us have been yearning for with this game. But I think they are trying too hard to grab potential customers from Pokemon Go. I understand their goal is to make money, but they made Pokemon even easier to play. It was already very easy unless you were a small child. Sure, the coach trainers and fighting all the masters at the end should provide some challenge for most, but the first time I experienced my Pikachu fainting was with the online battle with my friend. After knowing all this, is it still worth picking up Pokemon Let's Go for retail price? I kinda hate saying this, but I think you should wait for a sale. If you're a dedicated Pokemon Go player who doesn't care about previous generations of this game, then I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But for everyone else, for all the veterans of decades of playing this series, and for those wanting a glimpse at what the hype has been about all these years, it just isn't worth the full price. Everything just feels far too handholdy and geared towards kids or people who wouldn't be able to play this normally. Based on my progress, beating the game while visiting most houses and NPCs will yield about $2.5 to $3 per hour for a single playthrough. Completing the Pokédex and defeating all the masters should yield at least $2 per hour, and starting new adventures will make the playability limitless. My focus is going to be catching all the Pokemon and enjoying the upgraded visuals rather than the battling. I'll still 100% the game, but I'm going to be patiently waiting for what the new Pokemon title in 2019 will bring. And that's it for Pokemon Let's Go. Be sure to like this video if it helped you out, and subscribe to see my thoughts on upcoming titles. You can check out my social media by clicking on the links in the description below and see what other games I have in mind to review even before a video is released.